CBS 4's Jim DeFede joins us now.
And Jim, you spoke with Senator Marco Rubio a short time ago. What did he say about this decision?
Look, it's obvious that he supports the president's decision. He's long been an opponent of this deal. You know, one of the questions I asked him, Mo Lange sort of touched on at the end, will this now prompt the Iranian government to renew their desire for nuclear weapons, and will that bring the United States closer to military engagement with Iran? That's a question I put to Senator Rubio, and here's how he responded.
I don't believe so. I think what it makes it more likely is that the factors within Iran that have created conflict there already will only be exacerbated. There's already incredible discontent within Iran because even with the deal, the average Iranian, one of the youngest countries in the world, was no longer feeling was not getting the benefits. So there's a wholesale rejection of their leadership, and this is only going to make it more obvious in that regard. So I think Iran will no longer be freed up to continue to go around the world exporting terrorism or sponsoring its nefarious objectives, but instead will have to focus a little more on its own domestic realities, and in time that could bring a change within Iran that would be very positive.
I mean, here we are. This is something that President Trump ran on. This was a campaign promise that he made, and a promise that he's keeping.
A promise that he's keeping, and you can sort of get the sense that, you know, a little more than a year into office, he's now comfortable with the people around him. His original Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, his original, National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, wanted to stay in the deal. They're gone. The new team that's come in, they supported getting out of this deal. And I have to say, there's something refreshing about actually having a conversation about President Trump where you're discussing substantive policy issues as opposed to some of the many scandals that have surrounded him. So this was an interesting day for the presidency.
And Jim, you also talked to Rubio about the new reporting about the Parkland shooting and the fact that the shooter, Nicholas Cruz, was in fact a part of this Promise program, right. But it was 5 years ago for, I think it was a vandalism issue. What did Rubio say about that?
Look, first off, it was clear that Marco Rubio was unhappy. He had specifically met with Superintendent Runcie on numerous occasions. I had asked Superintendent Runcie these same questions as to whether or not Nicholas Cruz was part of the Promise program. Superintendent Runcie repeatedly said no, 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 he was not. Now we found out that he was. And you're right, it was a long time ago. So one of the questions I asked Senator Rubio, though, was, does he think that the Promise program should be gotten rid of? And here's his response.
Well, I think the Promise program certainly needs to be amended because it's led to what I believe is an unintended consequence, and that is that in an effort not to unjustly or unnecessarily arrest people in schools, we have at least one case in which someone that should have been arrested may not have been arrested, not just because of Promise, by the way, but because of a culture of permissiveness in which they seem to have bent over backwards not to force any young people to interact with the criminal justice system, even if they clearly were dangerous. If you look at, in hindsight, this case and a pattern of dangerous behavior over a number of years, there is no doubt that this shooter should have been arrested, should have had a criminal record, and therefore would have been prohibited from buying that gun.
Jim, my understanding is the Promise program actually works in, what, 9 out of 10 cases?
It does, and let's remember how we got to the Promise program. One of the things that we had found a number of years ago was that Broward County School District had the highest percentage of African Americans being arrested in their school system. It was a problem that the American Civil Liberties Unions and others had highlighted, and you needed to do away with that pipeline into the prison system mentality. So the idea was that for minor offenses, nonviolent offenses, you would have this program, give it, not just divert them into a program, but give them intensive watching and counseling that they would need to keep them fresh from it. And you're right, in 9 out of 10 cases it works. It will be a shame in this one where Nicholas Cruz was put into the program, whether he went or not, put into the program a number of years ago for vandalism. Certainly you're not going to be arrested and not be able to buy a gun because of a vandalism charge, but there were questions as to whether or not the program is extended too far.
All right, Jim DeFede, thank you very much.